Hey, I'm Lorna and welcome back to my channel, Thread and Yarn, which is all about my sewing, knitting, quilting, natural dyeing, wardrobe and all the things that I've made and what I'm planning on making. So this video I've decided to put together because a few of you had messaged me or left comments saying that you were interested in my sewing and knitting journey and how I sort of got into sewing, you know, how I learnt to make my own clothes, and also how I learnt to develop my style into what it is today. And there's no easy answer to, especially to the second half of that question, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about that, explain how I got into sewing, and talk you through some of the sort of ups and downs and wins and losses of figuring out my personal style. So if you're interested in a video about developing style and learning how to sew, how to start from being a beginner and to build up confidence in dressmaking, I'll talk a bit about knitting as well, but most of the comments seem to be about dressmaking and sewing, so I'm going to predominantly focus on that, although knitting is a big part of my homemade wardrobe, as you can see. So I will talk a bit about that as well. So I hope this is something that interests you. I hope it answers some of the questions and you can see a bit of the journey and see also that not everything works out and that some things are just part of the journey and part of the process of learning how to make and deciding what, you know, is good for you in your wardrobe. So yeah, I hope that it is of interest to you. So please join along if you fancy a little chat about those things. So I'll start with the first half of my journey into sewing and making my own clothes generally. So I learnt how to use a sewing machine when I was a child. My grandma taught me the basics. I had a little machine for an early birthday and she gave me a box of beautiful fabrics that she had picked out. Some of them had been hand-me-downs from her mum and some she'd picked up at a haberdashery. I still have the box, I still have many of the fabrics and the ribbons. I used some of them at the time, but they were so precious to me that I do this thing where I'm like, it's so precious and important and beautiful, I shan't use it. And then I end up keeping them all, which is, you know, silly. But I recently used white cotton lace in the last couple of years, the white cotton lace that she gave me that her mother had given her to trim the collar of a blouse. So that was really special for me and I was glad I finally found a use for it, like 20 something years later. But I learned the basics from my grandma, and we also learned a bit about how to sew at school, but mostly it was things like cushions, rather than no dressmaking at all. But I knew how to thread up a sewing machine, I knew the very basics. And then I had a big hiatus for, I don't know, 15 years or so. And then I think it must have been about 7 years ago, in my mid-20s, I decided to have a go at sewing again. And what inspired me was making a Halloween costume. I got it on eBay. It was an old outfit, like costume from a Robin Hood production. I tried to adjust it into something that would look like a Bride of a Vampire kind of dress. And I also got loads of fabric, like white velvet from thrifted curtains, and I turned it into a big vampire-y dress. I'll show you actually, why not? So I used some of the bodice from the costume and then I used the velvet curtains for length on the sleeves and for the skirt. But it was my first sort of foray into, I still love this thing. Oh, sadly, I did not have a Halloween party to wear it to this year. But it was my first sort of attempt at adjusting any sort of garment or making myself a dress. This, I borrowed my mother-in-law's sewing machine. It was an ancient Singer from the 80s. It had yellowed. It had loads of problems. I was constantly having to oil it and clean it out and just plead with it to work. But I really got the bug from that. And then I made my Halloween costume the next year as well. It was like a little t-shirt Star Trek dress. And I was like, wait, I can do this. This feels like, I mean, everything was bodged, but I felt it gave me a bit of confidence. Those things didn't really matter. They were just Halloween costumes. There was no pressure for it to be like a beautiful garment. But I got the bug and I realised that it was actually relatively accessible, and that YouTube in particular had tons of videos about how to do different things. So this got me thinking. And then it was about a year or two before lockdown, I upgraded this old Singer to a very basic, like modern Singer machine, a digital one, but like entry level. And I stuck with that until about 6 months ago when I upgraded to a slightly more professional machine. And that did me well. Like, that was brilliant. I think it was less than £200, and I've made 90% of the things that I've shown you with that machine, and 90% of the things that are here behind me. So it was brilliant, and you don't need to spend a fortune on a sewing machine to, get started on your sewing journey. I have spent more now, but that's because I sew most days and my poor Singer was getting a little bit worn out, and I just wanted some more, slightly more professional finishes. So once I had my Singer, I got really excited about starting to make some dressmaking patterns, and I had some friends who were already further along the journey than me and gave me some tips about good patterns for beginners, and that was really useful. And that's one of the reasons I try to talk about the patterns that I've made, what I've liked about them, what I haven't liked about them, because that was just invaluable to me when I was getting started. So I hope you find that useful as well. Now, the first thing I made, the first proper garment I made, was the Zadie jumpsuit. So I've got my first version here. It's super wrinkly because it's been bundled up, but I worn it a lot this summer during the hot times. But it's so poorly made. I just wanted to show you show you what it looked like when I started. So I'm still happy with the fit. It's super comfy. If anything, it's still my comfiest Zadie, and I've made about 6 or 7 now. And I think it's because I used this really lightweight chambray material. But I was emboldened with this kind of like foolish confidence that you get at the beginning of starting any hobby, where you're like, I don't really need to look things up. I don't really need to pay attention to the instructions. What are seam allowances? Are they even important? So I just bodged a lot of it. And I barely finished the seams. But it's kind of holding up. I did make a tear in it this summer when I was doing something with the chickens, probably. So I'm going to patch it up because I still wear it a lot. But here it is. I'll post the full length picture I took. But it's still really, really comfy. But this is what the inside of it looks like. What a mess. Still looks like this. I followed 0 instructions for how to finish the seams. I can't even remember what I've done here. My tension's all over the place. I've basically just done a running stitch along here. I've not folded the seam over twice. I've literally just folded it over once, not finished the seam, and put a running, like, straight stitch down on the outside. So you can see all the threads when I'm wearing it. It's so comfy. So I do still wear it a lot when I'm at home and when I'm out, to be honest. But yeah, the insides are all like this. The pleats don't really match, and I was so happy to have even sewed them together that I definitely didn't unpick and try to make it any better. You see, I've caught the fabric there. So the reason I'm showing you this is sewing, like anything, is a journey. You can't be perfect at it straight away, and I definitely felt like I made a lot of stuff at the beginning and I didn't make it very well. And sometimes I think, God, that was so wasteful. But then all of these things were important to me because I learned something from every single one of them. So I've learned from this. I didn't do the seams like this. I actually read it properly, and my ones following on from that were much better. So although, I mean, this is maybe not a good example because I still get a lot of wear out of it, but there's a lot of things that I don't for multiple reasons. And I think they're all important because they've all helped me figure out different things along the way. So this, I've learned a lot about how to finish things technically better on the inside, but there's other things as well that I've learned about in terms of style. So this Zadie I've made multiple times since, and I just wanted to show you the progression. So this is a sort of one I made in the middle, I guess. I've made others since that are slightly more technical, like they've got fully lined bodices and it's silk fabric and things. But this is just a basic run-of-the-mill linen, but I have spent time on trying to match the pleats. I finished the seams. Now, this is finished with an overlocker, which you don't need. You can just do a good zigzag, but it's important to get your tension right. And it's important to have a zigzag with a narrow width, not depth, width, so that you're catching all of those edges that could fray, especially with something like linen. But I make a point now of always, when it says to press the seam before top stitching down, I always do it, especially with fabrics like, or with projects like jeans or anything that's going to have top stitching on. I've got a top stitching tips video, I'll put it up here, but always follow the instructions for pressing. It makes such a difference. I just spent a lot more time on it. I wasn't trying to rush it. At the beginning, I felt like I was so desperate to produce stuff. I was so desperate to be better and further along. I just made and made and made, and I was quite consumptive of materials, and it took up a lot of my time. And then when it didn't go well, I'd be quite frustrated, and inevitably it didn't go that well because I was rushing it. So now I take quite a lot of time over things. It might seem like I make things relatively quickly, but if I do that, it's because I've taken a whole day off, like holiday from work, and I do nothing else. But that sometimes that works for me. That's kind of always how I've been. I do have longer projects like jeans, which will often go on for weeks, maybe even a month or more. But with something that I know well, like a Zadie, like the Zadie wrap dress I've made recently, I know what I'm doing, and I quite enjoy, like, let's have a really immersive day making it. But that's the progression, and there is a lot of stuff in between this and this that has helped me learn. And it doesn't happen overnight, but it's fine to make mistakes, it's fine to learn as you go, it's all part of the learning process. I hope that helps. So that's a kind of technical making part of the journey. There's also things in terms of style that I've learned. So there are things, and I think I still do this now, but definitely a lot when I was first beginning, I made things that looked great on other people, or that were hashtags that were really popular. So I thought, I've got an example of this. Now, I like this fabric because I do quite like a floral fabric if it looks quite like vintagey and I can combine it with something else. So I like this fabric. I got it from Hey Sew Sister. It's really sweet little yellow flowers. It's coming up, yeah. So it's really delicate and sweet. I saw loads of the Dream Frock by Lydia Naomi, which is a lovely pattern and looks great on loads of people. There's nothing wrong with the pattern at all. It's like a milkmaid style. It's a dress or a blouse pattern with the bust being quite gathered and then the ties here. I just find it too irritating to wear, and so I never put it on. Now, a lot of that is because I decided to share the back because I was trying to avoid any kind of zip on the little top, but it's too fussy for me. So I do quite like blouses with a lot of detail or big collars, but I like them to not feel like it's slipping off my shoulder, or that there's a tie that's gonna, my boobs are gonna tumble out, or whatever kind of like horrifying scenario I can think of. But it's too fussy for me in those kind of details. I loved it because it looked great on Instagram. I saw so many beautiful dresses, but the reality is I'm never gonna, maybe if I went to a wedding I would wear a dress like that, but I'm just not gonna get a lot of use out of it. My life is I'm often at my allotment or in the garden, or I'm making things. I'm a writer most of the time, but I'm also an illustrator. So I like my dark clothes and what clothes that I can pop in the wash. So it just doesn't really fit with my life. If I was going to go out, I probably wouldn't wear something like this anyway. So yeah, I don't really know what to do with it. It's well made. but I might try to make it, I don't know, piece it into something else. But it's just an example of going with a trend, really. Milkmaid blouses and dresses were a huge trend last summer and the summer before, and probably still are now, but it is just a bit too faddy for me and not practical enough. But there's nothing wrong with this pattern, there's nothing wrong with this style, it just doesn't work for me. And then when I see it in my wardrobe, I feel a bit guilty, so I feel like I want to figure out something to do with it. That was just an example of me kind of like following a trend rather than thinking about my life and what I like to wear, what I feel comfortable in. So yeah, not everything works out. But an example of a blouse that I do really like, or a couple of them actually. So this is the Patterner blouse by Friday Pattern Company. I still haven't hemmed it, that is so typical. See, oh my gosh. I think in one of my earlier videos I hadn't hemmed this and I was saying I'm going to have to do it soon. I still haven't, that's classic. So I always tuck stuff into my jeans, you see, and I'm borderline lazy. So anyway, this has got fussy elements to it, but it's different to the Dream Frock in that this feels it's quite like romantic and loose, and do you see, it's just, there's not much structure to it. Whereas this one has beautiful, sort of slightly fussy, romantic elements, like the big collar. I spent time putting some rickrack trim on it, which I really liked. There's a little bit of a puff that I popped in the sleeve there. And again, I did binding and a gathered sleeve with some rickrack. But I feel comfortable, I feel secure in it. It's a nice like cotton lawn, it can go in the washing machine. It's just really useful. And I feel like it's lovely for a dinner out. I feel like it's slightly dressed up. It's quite special, and yeah, but it's much more wearable for me than the other one. I spent some time thinking about how it was actually going to work in my life and what kind of fabric I wanted. So I wanted something slightly more robust and useful. So this was a win for me, and it is an example of how they're both quite fussy blouses, but in different ways. Also, this one, this linen one, which I love, this is an Anthea blouse. It's quite loose, it's quite relaxed, but I've got options, you know, I can button it all the way up to the top if I want, I can unbutton it a bit more. It's great for layering, I can put waistcoats over it, like this Miller waistcoat that I wear a lot. And I think that's the thing for me, I've learned that layering is really important. So instead of making pieces that kind of have to be on their own, I quite like making lots of little things that I can build up an outfit together, and then it puts less pressure on one thing, and I can be quite creative about how I combine them. And it also means that I can sort of wear them through the seasons, which I really enjoy doing. So what was quite like a summery lightweight blouse, now it's got quite an autumny, wintry vibe because I've combined it with this black cord Miller waistcoat. So things like that I've realised are essential in my wardrobe. I know I'm a massive vest fan, and I'm sure they come up in every video that I make, but this is why. Which brings me on to talking about layering. So layering has become, like I said, an essential part of my style and my wardrobe. And it's for a couple of reasons. So firstly, it's so practical. Like I said, you can transform a summery outfit into an autumn wintry one, and I just find that really useful. It means also that my wardrobe doesn't end up getting bigger and bigger and bigger as I make a summer blouse and then I make a winter blouse, combining different elements together to give it a totally different, you know, feeling. So instead of it being pretty and romantic, it's now slightly edgy, maybe even a bit spooky because of the dark waistcoat. And I have a lot of fun putting stuff together like that and experimenting. And I've got some knitted waistcoats that kind of do the same thing for me, or knitted vests. So this one that I'm wearing now, this is the vest number 1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I'm wearing it with this checked Olia shirt in a Merchant & Mills, quite lightweight cotton. I wear this shirt for gardening a lot. It's really comfortable. It's quite lightweight. If I was to wear it on its own, it'd have to be a relatively warm or mild day. But combined with this brown vest, it just it's perfect for this quite dreary autumnal day. Now this one I've shown you a few times. This is the Holiday Slipover by Petite Knit in a super chunky wool. I think it's the Big Wool by Rowan. It was a really quick, easy knit. I think it was the first knitted vest I made. I wasn't totally sure if they were going to suit me, but I knew I liked the idea of layering and I wanted to give it a go. So I did, and I made it to be on the safe side in my favourite ever colour. So I love brown, but green is my true soul colour. This sort of warm yellowy green, which was quite safe for me. And it's great because it matches so much of my stuff, which is really useful. And it's a great warm winter layer. I often wear a knitted vest over something like a Olia shirt. So often I will find a pattern that I like and I will make it in lots of different fabrics to experiment. So this Olia shirt, which is in a very lightweight cotton, I've made in a couple of different linens. Things like the Zadie I've made in cotton and linen and silk. So I know the pattern, I know it well, I know where I tend to trip up or the adjustments I like to make, and I've stuck with those patterns. But I'm still experimenting with the fibres and the textures and the colours, which I really like. I find that, they can look totally different from each other, just experimenting with those things. So yeah, big fan of vests for layering. I think no matter, I know the vest is kind of a faddy thing as well, but I just find them so practical and useful, and I don't care what happens in the future. I'm going to be wearing vests forever. So, talking of Olia shirts, another early make, and something that I felt like was quite a sort of pivotal moment in my style and colouring choices. So I've always loved green, but I think I understood in the last few years a bit more about the type of green that suits me. So I made this Olia shirt in this linen from Merchant and Mills. I think it's called Pine. And when I first made it, I thought, must have been like 3 years ago, I thought, oh my God, the style is so extreme, because it's quite a lot of positive ease. The style is so extreme, I feel like, is this embarrassing? And I'm just being honest. Is this, a really odd thing to be wearing? And does it look really strange on me? And I think that's because growing up in the 2000s and the 90s, there was such a focus, especially being a teenager in the 2000s, such a focus on everything being super tight fitting. Everything had to be skin tight. All the jeans were skinny. Shirts had to be incredibly tailored, and everything was fitted. Pencil skirts, fitted blouses, stilettos. And again, I went to uni in 2010, and that was the uniform at the time. And it's taken me a lot of time to feel comfortable with experimenting with shapes and ease. I grew up thinking that if something had a lot of space and positive ease, it didn't fit well and it was unflattering. And that was just, a rule for life, and that was a fact. And it's taken a lot of time to get myself out of that headspace. And, firstly, I follow what I find comfortable, but also positive ease is incredibly stylish, and you can have a lot of fun playing with shapes and textures. You can get quite architectural shaped things. It can be really fun. And there's a hashtag with FUCK, flattering. Flattery. Anyway, and I'm all for that. I like to feel good in something. I like to feel like I look nice, like I've put effort in, or that things kind of suit me. But I'm dressing for me at the end of the day, and I'm dressing for what I feel on the inside to be on the outside. So I have fun experimenting with fibres. I choose things that represent my values, so sustainable fibres. And I am a creative person. I like being creative with what I wear as well. It's just an expression of my personality, and I think a lot of people feel the same. So it's taken me quite a lot of time to become comfortable with that and to really play around with things like ease and shapes and colours. So this was quite an early make for me, and once I'd made it and gotten used to wearing it, I just fell in love with it, and I've made quite a few Ollie shirts since then, this being one of them. Talking of colours and deciding what colours suit you, quite a lot of you comment on that it seems like I've got quite a clear idea of the colours that suit me. I would say that is probably the case now. Well, I think it is the case now, but it definitely wasn't in the past. I think I picked stuff that I liked the look of, or I liked the look of on other people, and same with, styles. And I didn't really think about what suited me. I also dyed my hair a lot when I was a teenager, and I spent most of my early 20s as a very light blonde. And I think that definitely changed the colours that I chose. But as I've sort of grown into myself as a person and also into my style, I've really thought a bit more about colours. So there are things you can do online. So I did at some point a couple of years ago one of those quizzes to figure out what colour palette you are. It's up to you how much you follow things like that, or you take notice of things like that. But I did it. I answered it as honestly as I could. I think I did a couple, and because I just really wasn't feeling comfortable in the things I was wearing or the colours, I came out as a soft autumn. Now there's a whole range of different outcomes, but it just felt really right to me when I saw it, and I saw the pictures of other soft autumn example people and the colour palette that they recommended. And normally I would say don't follow such prescriptive things, express yourself, experiment organically. But it's just, I thought I would tell you just because it's something that helped me. And it recommended lots of softer autumnal colours. So lots of browns, lots of greens, lots of rusts, lots of sort of dusky, warm blues, and to stay away from cool colours like baby pink or certain types of purple or things like aqua, like limey green, really sort of yellowy but like neon-y green, no, or any kind of neon on me, to be honest, no, it makes me look unwell. But these sort of colours with quite a lot of warmth and depth really just, it really made an impact on me. And I started just getting fabric swatches and holding them up in the mirror, or even better, sort of taking pictures of me with them. And something just really clicked for me, and it was lucky because autumn is my favourite month. I've always absolutely adored autumnal colours, and I don't know why it never occurred to me. Maybe things weren't really available in those colours. But to dress like the colours that were in my mind that inspired me, and a lot of those colours turned out to be quite natural colours. And I am quite fair, but I'm not sort of completely blonde, a dark blonde, light brown, I would say. Those sort of soft but natural colours do just suit me. And I am very happy that a lot of them are found in natural dyes. And I actually think that you don't have to be a soft autumn. I think natural dyes just seem to suit a lot of people, and they all go well together, just like nature intended. I'm pointing at these because this has got lots of natural dye on it. And it doesn't have to be that I have to stick to green and yellows and browns, which is kind of what I've done over the last few years. This year I've been experimenting a bit more with blue. So I like this pattern of blouse. I think this colour, I've got blue eyes, but it's quite soft and there is a warmth to this blue. And same with these. So these are fabrics I bought for a quilt, but I still think that these colours suit me. And this is quite, so it's not just that I've realised now when I'm sorted, I know exactly what colours will suit me for the rest of my life. I bought this for a quilt, and I held it up against me and I thought, that's quite a deep colour. That's much deeper than a lot of the other colours I've got before. But I think the teal suits me, probably because of my blue eyes. What I wouldn't do is get a pink or something, a really cool toned pink or purple in this kind of depth. So it's all about experimenting, and I'm surprised sometimes too. But I want to experiment a bit more with blues. I wouldn't go paler than this. I think this is borderline. So I wouldn't go for like a baby blue. These are not rules for anyone else, but just things that I'm experimenting with. And sometimes it's not until I hold them up. It was when I did I think it was when I did my October video update, and I watched back the video as I was editing it, and I saw that I'd held these up, and I was like, actually, that goes. I feel like that I could experiment with a blouse or a shirt or something in that colour. So there's definitely, you know, experimenting to be done and things still to learn. But on the whole, I'm trying to create a wardrobe with a palette of things that go well together. Firstly, because I think they're things that suit my colouring, but also because they are very interchangeable, and I go back to my layering point, and that lots of them can just work well together. And actually, it's by filming a lot of these videos that I figure out the combination of things that I like to wear. It forces me to be a bit more creative, and I can see what I'm doing because I have my camera facing me to make sure I'm looking at it and it's still filming. And I see things behind me, and I'm like, oh man, that would go well with this. Yeah, so it's been really useful for me in figuring that out. So thanks for your help on that. It's just experimenting. It's just trying things out. Now I often get samples of fabric instead of buying huge amounts, or I go around and I look at garments in shops. I do that sometimes. Toast is a big favourite. I will see what I like there, and it will inspire me a bit in terms of, oh, I like their collection, or I like the colours they've put together there, or the textures. Same with Instagram, you know, I'm being inspired all the time, but I try to slow down a bit that impulse. So I'm trying to stop. And I think I used to do that before. When I used to buy clothes, I would have that rush of excitement about buying new clothes, and I can definitely get that with fabric and patterns. So I try to slow down. I don't just rush when there's a load of new fabric that arrives in a shop. It's fine to treat yourself, and it's fine to have that excitement, but I realised I ended up with cupboards full of fabric that just don't really suit me and that don't have a place in my life. So I'm just trying to think a bit more consciously about that before I buy, and not let that impede my creativity and my experimentation, but just to slow down and to try and stop that feeling of guilt that you get when you've bought too much, or when you look at your cupboards and you think, I'm never going to use that and I don't know what to do with it. Occasionally I've done little sales on my Instagram, and hopefully it's brought joy to somebody else who it's much more well suited for. A few other things I just wanted to show you that have been quite key in developing my style. So the zero waste gather dress, I just think, is a brilliant pattern. And when I first saw it, I thought, I'm not sure that's for me. That's quite a lot of ease. There's, it's quite a big step in terms of, and I change from my style. Again, all those thoughts about everything has to be really fitted came into my head. This isn't the first version I made of it. The first version I made was a cotton that I dyed, so I practiced the shape and everything like that. And I'm glad I did, because I gave it a go, because so many people seem to love it and get loads of wear out of it. And I thought, you know what, it's a really good layering dress. And I think because of the size of the skirt, it can be good in the winter with thick tights. I can wear my vests and waistcoats over it. I could see even putting it over a roll neck jumper. So I thought I'll give it a go. And I made a cotton version. And I thought that bodice does have quite a lot of ease, and I'm relatively tall, and I'm 5'8", just under. And I didn't want to be this, have this massive dress and feel quite tall, and I wanted it to be quite long, so I often like my dresses long for the warmth, the layering, winter, as I said. So I thought, I want the ease, but I'm going to knit the bodice in a bit. So on my cotton version, inexpensive fabric, I took the bodice in by quite a few inches on both sides. And doing that, having that practice run, I'm so glad I did, because it fitted me really well and I really like the cut of it. And I think just that little change made the pattern really wearable for me, and it's now one of my favourites. But I wouldn't have done that on my expensive linen from Merchant & Mills. So sometimes having that practice fabric, that I think people call it muslin or toile as well, is great for testing fit. So instead of cutting into your really expensive fabric and having something you don't really love, or something that's just hanging there guiltily in your wardrobe, or that you feel a bit sad about because you spent money and time on it, doing practice run, I know it's a bit boring and sometimes you just want to crack on, and I do sometimes just cut straight into things. usually if I've already made that pattern before. But I really recommend it because now this pattern just works for me and I get so much wear out of it, which is what I want. I don't want things to be hanging in my wardrobe and not really worn, so I was really happy about that. And then I made this linen version, which is one of my favourite all-time makes, to be honest. It's so different to my cotton one, which really kind of holds its shape because it's cotton and like cotton lawn, which is kind of stiff. It's almost like a crafting cotton weight. This has got a lovely drape. It's so soft. I've worn it loads, and the more you wear linen, the softer it gets. And yeah, I've done loads of stuff in this. Sometimes I dress it up and I make it a bit more, I think I've worn it for heels and worn it to a garden party. I've also worn it with chunky boots, out for walks, to the pub, layering up with jumpers over the top. It's a great layer. Big fan. I do have a little bit of news about this as well, which I'm going to tell you a bit more about. It's quite, well, in the future, but it's quite exciting. A few of you over the last several months, years, have asked me if I do anything like tutorials or like one-to-one sewing time or things like that, if I would be willing to do some teaching. And I have, or if I would make you things. I'm not really keen on making clothes for other people because I think it's so hard for creators to actually be paid well for their time. Dresses would cost hundreds of pounds. And I think when you start sewing, you learn the value of that and the value of clothes. So I'm not really keen on doing that, but I am quite keen on doing teaching. I've done a lot of teaching in my life. I'm not a professional teacher, but I've done loads of private tutoring and of quite practical skill things as well. So a bit of a sidetrack. I used to be a doctor and I did a lot of teaching younger students about how to do things like take blood and all sorts of practical things. And I've also done various crafting teaching as well. I'm not a doctor anymore. I don't do all of this and work in a hospital. Back to the zero waist gather dress. Now, a lot of you were very keen on the zero waist, who messaged me, were keen on either being made or making the zero waist gather dress. Now, I've reached out to Birgitta Helmersson, who is delightful, and I've asked her if she would mind if I ran a little tutorial on how to make your own. It would be in person, based in Stroud in the UK somewhere, and it would be either a 1 or a 2 day like retreat basically for anyone in the area, and I'm figuring out if I can find some accommodation as well in Stroud to make it a thing that you can travel to. And it would be a sort of dedicated small group workshop about how to make your own zero waist gather dress, because Birgitta Helmersson very kindly gave me her permission. So everyone would have to buy the pattern obviously themselves, but yeah, I would guide you through how to make it and tailor it for you. So I'm thinking about doing this in the spring or the summer next year. I still need to figure out loads of details. I just wanted to let you guys know first, and you can let me know if it's the sort of thing that you'd be interested in. But putting myself out there a bit there, but I'm excited about it. I think we could create some really cool stuff together. It'd be fun to meet some of you, but I'll figure out more details over the next few months. I just wanted to let you guys know first, and you are the first people I'm telling, apart from a couple of people I've mentioned it to in person. So there you go. Let me know if you're interested. Awesome pattern though. Great dress. Now the other one is this Ellis and Hattie by Merchant and Mills. I made it in a cotton from Simply Fabrics Brixton. I made the Hattie, but I narrowed the skirt, and it's my favourite dress, I think, ever. I love it. I wear it so much. I only narrowed the skirt because I didn't have enough fabric, but I'm so glad I did, because it just gives it a really cool straight silhouette, and it feels a bit more it feels less flouncy than a lot of my other dresses, which have got a lot of volume in the skirt, and I really like it for that. I'm a big fan. I talk about this, I think, in every single video. These colours here are core colours in my wardrobe. So it's a dark navy grey colour with a warm brown. I wear so much warm brown, and it's things like the green, the olivey green, warm brown, maybe a bit of dark navy. These are all core colours and they all blend in with each other. I will have a couple of neutral pieces that I like to wear with things like that have got a lot of pattern. This is another Ollie shirt in a sort of cream colour basically. I make a few neutrals, and then a lot of my stuff is rich and warm, or soft and warm, autumnal colours. I'm a gingham obsessed person, as you can tell, but I'm going to stick with that forever. I think I love it so much. It means you can play around with it a little bit with pattern and colours, but without something that it feels like it's going to be so specific that I'm going to struggle to wear it with other things. The last thing I want to show you is another waistcoat. So as I've been developing my style, as I said, waistcoats and vests have become hugely important to me because I find them practical and because I love how they look. Now, I have been slowly designing my own waistcoat pattern because I wanted something that was going to be lovely in the winter, relatively high necked, and that could be either quilted or made with a fabric like fleece or wool. Now, I finished my first sample. It's in a beautiful wool remnant from Sew Me Sunshine, and I've lined it with a dress that I made at the beginning of my sewing journey that I didn't really love anymore and didn't fit me well, and I'd done way too many bodgy things on it. So I've cut it up and I've reused it as the lining for my waistcoat. So it's fully lined and it's got this high neck. I've put some embroidery on it. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, and I was watching it as I was embroidering, so I think I've been super inspired by that. Bilbo Baggins is probably my #1 style icon, I have to say. So I am thinking about calling this vest the Bilbo vest. So I was unsure if it's something I'm going to keep for me or release as a sewing pattern. I really would like to release it as a sewing pattern and share it with you, but I've been working on it for months and months and months, and it is a slow burn because if I did release it as a sewing pattern, I would want it to be accessible to everybody in terms of sizing and instructions and cost, and so it just means that there's so many things to figure out, especially in terms of the grading, because I want it to work for everyone. I don't want anyone to feel sort of shut out of the sewing community or out of patterns that they like. So I'm working on it very slowly and seeking help in technical areas that I need help in. But I'm really excited about this. I'm going to make some other versions. I've got some fleece coming. I'm going to do maybe a bit of blanket stitch because I want there to be extra things involved with the pattern. So like a bit of slowness, a bit of stitching, yeah, nice little finishes, and I'll show you how to hand quilt a version as well. But I'll put it on for you. I feel like this is just a really good example of how my style has developed. Put more slow elements into it. I've made something that's really practical, that does a good job in my wardrobe, but that also has an element of something special to it. I need to give it a bit of a press, and this is it layered up over a shirt and a knitted vest. But I think this wool layer is just going to be so useful in the winter, and there's enough room around the neck for you to be wearing like a high-necked jumper or shirt, because I am obsessed with layering. But there you go. I'm thinking about adding some darts in as well if I, as an option. I'm thinking about getting some velvet to go really, Hobbiton style, make it slightly more dressier. So it's going to be, I could wear this to the allotment, or I could wear something to a Christmas party. So I want it to be really versatile. Like a lot of my patterns and things that I've loved, I have made them in loads of different fabrics and make them really versatile, and you can wear them throughout the year and combine them with all of your other stuff. So this has been a bit of a long video, and I hope it hasn't been too rambly. I just wanted to really talk you through my thought process, explain that I've had lots of things that haven't worked out, but they're all part of my, sewing journey and emotional journey with making. And I've learnt things from all of them, and none of them as a result are a waste, although I think it is important to think about that sort of thing. And I do a lot more buying samples now and practicing with less expensive fabric. It's been an evolution in terms of the style and colours, but slowly I'm getting there. Oh, I didn't ever show you this one, but it's basically just the perfect colour. And when I got this, I was like, this is it. And sometimes I'll get a key piece like this and I'll build things around it so that everything will go, because it's just like a really good example of my colour palette. And I'll often get all of my things out and lay them all out together and see what they look like, which is another reason, like I said, about this video, these videos helping. I forgot to talk to you about knitting, but essentially I do the same thing with wool as I do with fabric. I often get them out and I look at them together, and I often buy, you know, gloriously, delicious natural fibres of a similar colour palette. So again, same principle as my sewing, it's all pretty interchangeable, and I can combine beautifully different textures and fibres, as well as a range of different autumny colours. I hope that was useful for you. Please get involved in the comments if there was something you was hoping this video was going to cover but that I didn't talk about, or if anything was confusing or not sure. Please comment, let me know, and I'll try to cover it in a future video, because I want it to be enjoyable and, you know, useful as well as relaxing. This doesn't have to be a style revolution for you, it can just be a relaxing thing to watch. But please, if there's anything you wanted me to cover that I didn't, please pop it in the comments. Let me know what you think of this vest as well. It's so hard putting your creative self out there. But I think it's going to be really cool. And let me know as well about the sort of sewing zero waste gather dress retreat. I am going to figure some more details out, including a location. I've got a couple of things in mind, but I will share more about that over the coming months. But exciting. Happy November. Enjoy this beautiful autumnal month. I hope you're all doing well. So thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. I'm going to do a November update, and I'm also going to cast on my shawl soon. I'm still deciding on the final pattern that I'm going to use, but I thought I'd show you a little bit about that journey. Later in the winter, I'm going to start my quilt, and I'll explain as I go about that. I've got some quilting books which I'll talk through with you coming up as well. So that's everything I've got planned, I think, for the sort of mid-autumn, start of winter season. And I hope you'll join me. So thank you. Bye.